talk about couples that take till death do us part, rather literally. Welcome to the Lost Explained episode guide, in which we will be exploring and explaining Lost, episode by episode, mystery by mystery. Now, these guides are spoiler heavy and intended for those who already know the secrets of the island, so you have been warned. House of the Rising Sun is the 6th episode of Season 1, and it's a Jin and Sun-centric storyline that sees the couple faced with their first major rift on the island. And, bizarrely, it's all over Michael. Jin has it in for him over a watch, and Sun reveals to the very same man that she speaks English. Meanwhile, Jack, Kate, Charlie and Locke investigate the caves and make an interesting mythological discovery. Let's talk about it. There are many love stories told in Lost, but the one that most fans agree upon as being one of the best is the story of Jin and Sun. Now, what makes their story particularly heart-wrenching and unique is that they are already together when we meet them, and their romance is less about how they meet and more about how they rediscover and reconnect with one another after the plane crash. Their relationship goes on to be defined by being separated and kept apart for long stretches of the story, often providing each of them with a drive to find the other again. The reason why their romance is so great is because it doesn't follow the conventional beats that most love stories tend to do. In fact, we meet them at the nadir of their relationship. Jin is overprotective and controlling, tantamount to a bully protecting his territory. He's antagonistic to anyone he perceives as a threat. This, of course, all stems from his employment with Sun's gangster father, Mr. Paik, who made a deal with the couple that if they are to be married, then Jin must work for the family business. Now, this deal is made a little bit more convoluted in later episodes, when the writers start milking the backstory for more flashback material. Jin knows that Mr. Paik controls their lives, and if he sees that Jin is not living up to his role as a protector and provider to Sun, then what use is he? In a nutshell, the things Jin sees and is forced to do as a result of this family bargain end up hardening him, as a violent life tends to do to people. So much so that Jin begins to change at home, and I think he actually comes to resent his wife. He has sold his soul for love, and ironically this is what drives them apart. Of course, this isn't a justification for Jin's behaviour by any means, it's merely an explanation of how I view his psychology in these early episodes. Sun appears to be a submissive wallflower at first, but she really is her father's daughter, as we later discover. She can be just as ruthless when she needs to be, having learned from her years of observing her father's unseemly business practices, but she also pretends to be unknowing, naive, and in the dark, in order to maintain the illusion that she is just an innocent party living in ignorance, just what her father and Jin want her to be. Yet we know she's actually a woman with many secrets of her own. She speaks English, for one thing, and her playing the part of the oblivious foreigner speaks to her years of being able to keep secrets and play roles in her marriage. Sun is ultimately in conflict with her own feelings. She wants to leave her husband as he is no longer the man that she fell in love with and married. She has a plan in motion to make her escape in Australia, but a momentary flicker of the man that Jin once was is powerful enough to make her change her mind.
I was going to leave you. I was going to get away. But you made me change my mind.
Now she is trapped with him on the island, and he has reverted to his post-Paik Industries attitude. His armour is back on again. As touched upon in the episode guide for the pilot, there has been criticism of the way the Kwons are portrayed in the early days of Season 1. Now, I'm not familiar enough with South Korean culture to really know how accurate or stereotypical some of these scenarios and behaviours are, but I am aware that there are aspects of their culture that emphasises values such as male dominance and collectivist attitudes, as well as an overt class system that has been portrayed in various other media from South Korea, perhaps most famously in the Oscar-winning Parasite. Jin is a fisherman's son, and he is embarrassed by his low-status heritage, while Sun is the daughter of a rich businessman, therefore she should really be out of his reach. Now, Daniel Day Kim claimed that he had problems with some of the stereotyping from the pilot. In an interview with EW, he said the following: "For a long time, Jin didn't exist outside of that relationship. My entire character was created to be a foil to service Sun's storyline. Jin was a secondary character to a secondary character, and he was this heavily xenophobic individual who was mean to his wife. The first scenes where I'm telling her to button up her blouse, being someone who had been acutely aware of how many stereotypes had been in our media, it really was hard to say those lines and be that guy in those moments. My greatest fear was if we never got a chance to show that growth, and if the only example of an Asian male on the show was one that was misogynistic." But he went on to discuss how unique and progressive this relationship was for the time. "I'd never seen a relationship like that on television before. Two non-white characters speaking predominantly in a language that was not English on primetime TV, and having that be something that the average American could get behind and ship. Jin and Sun became the heart of Lost, but I think if people were to watch the pilot, they would never have expected for this relationship to have lasted, let alone be one that was memorable." Yoon-jin Kim goes on to add, "I was worried about representing the Asian community because it was a sensitive topic. Back in 2004, believe it or not, I was told we were the first 2 Asian series regulars on an American show." It's hard to believe now, but Lost really was breaking a few glass ceilings here, and it added a lot of novelty to the drama because Western audiences were now seeing a certain type of story they wouldn't normally see spotlighted. And for those who had never seen any foreign language films or TV before, Jin and Sun might have been their very first introduction to the world of other cultures in storytelling, in which entire interactions would take place in a different language and require subtitles. The writer of the episode, Javier Grillo-Marxuach, wrote about this in his Vanity Fair article, which was titled Lost Turns 20. The episode wound up being very well received. For an hour of TV produced in 2004 to feature 2 Asian leads, with 30% of the dialogue Korean with English subtitles, and for it to be met with so little resistance from the studio or network, was a minor miracle in and of itself, and a great show of faith. Co-creator J.J. Abrams had promised the actors that the Kwons would eventually evolve beyond domineering Asian husband and subservient Asian wife stereotypes, and it wasn't a false promise. Jin and Sun did become more complex and nuanced with each passing episode, and eventually became a real power couple on the island. Although I don't think anyone could have anticipated just how heart-wrenching their love story was going to become from these early episodes. Jin and Sun's story has all of the ups and downs of a real marriage, and they are easily the most fully realised relationship on the show, bar none. What I find that this episode does get right about the racial and cultural dynamics of this situation is how the rest of the group view the Kwons. They are extremely isolated as a couple, in part due to the group's perceptions of them as Asians who don't speak English, but also because of Jin's behaviour. Their fellow castaways view them as hard work, and they keep the couple at a distance. This kind of cultural alienation is a very real thing, and I think Lost explores it very well. Sun later finds a confidant in Kate, as well as gaining the trust of Jack as his pseudo-nursing assistant, and there is even an early attempt by the writers to explore a potential love triangle with Michael, although the possibilities of this romantic subplot is dropped after the first season, and only ever explored in one of the Missing Pieces mobisodes in which the two almost share a kiss together. I'm really glad that this storyline did not go any further, as it would have undermined the later friendship that developed between Michael and Jin, as well as the eventual reconciliation between the married couple. However, this sexual tension with Michael does have a basis rooted in character backstory, as we will find out later that Sun was indeed having an affair. Both Yoon-jin Kim and Harold Perrineau play those subtle beats of tension between them whenever they share a scene in future, even by the time they're on the freighter, and I just love that subtlety in the way they interact, giving off that we almost could have hooked up energy. Anyway, as Sun makes more efforts to integrate with the other castaways, despite Jin's reluctance, they begin to find full acceptance within the group, although it continues to be a struggle for Jin for a long time. In fact, what I find interesting about Sun and Jin in Season 1 is how their relationship reverses. Once everyone knows that Sun can communicate in English, the power dynamics shift, and Jin loses his dominance in the marriage entirely. He is once again the outcast, but we'll get to that later in the season. While Jin might seem like a stereotype at first, House of the Rising Sun lays the groundwork to truly start giving the man some depth and complexity. And we see the first buds of independence blooming with Sun as she saves the day by doing the one thing that these two men seem incapable of: communicating.
I need to talk to you.
And I suppose communication is really what this episode is all about. These people are only just learning to talk to one another, and even then they aren't expressing themselves very well. And things are getting, well, lost in translation. House of the Rising Sun is another fairly simple episode, much closer to the tone of a Tabula Rasa than Walkabout or White Rabbit. It's primarily focused on island survival drama and the conflicts between members of the group, in this case Jin and Michael. But there's plenty going on. There's a sequence involving some angry bees.
Oh, no, not the bees! Not the bees! Ah!
And I honestly think the only reason that this moment was inserted into the episode was so Jack and Kate could take off their shirts. There are many moments over the course of the series where the writers think up reasons to get characters to show some skin, perhaps with an understanding that sex sells, and audiences by and large do like to see attractive people getting it on in attractive locations. So Season 1 is not without a shortage of moments that draw our attention to sexual tension, and particularly how hot everyone looks on this island.
Plane crash, you both survived. Nice beach. She's hot, you're hot. It's what people do.
I can only describe these moments as being bait for horny shippers, those in the audience who are more interested in the development of the romantic pairings of characters than any crazy island lore. While I often feel like some of these moments skirt a little bit too close to romantic soap opera, I do understand why they are there, and I also appreciate that many of the love stories become fundamentally important to the development of multiple character arcs. I do always enjoy the scene that happens to precede the bee attack, involving a rather awkward flirtation between Jack and Kate. It's the first time that their attraction is directly addressed in dialogue. In this instance, Kate playfully accuses Jack of checking her out, and when Jack denies it, she thinks she is glibly calling his bluff.
If I was checking you out, you'd know it.
Yeah, so then what were you thinking? Right now.
Well, I sure as hell wasn't thinking that.
Don't stop to think, just tell me.
I was thinking that if we were living at the caves, we could build a dam around that spring.
When Jack immediately starts to explain that he was actually thinking about moving everyone to the caves and not staring at her ass, the slightly disappointed look on Kate's face always makes me laugh. The more mystical elements that were ever present in the previous two episodes only briefly come into view here. Locke makes a deal with Charlie, the heroine, for the guitar, only Locke phrases it as if the island is going to give Charlie what he wants. After Charlie gives up his stash, Locke points up and Charlie sees his guitar suspended above him. Now clearly Locke had already spotted the guitar and is simply hiding that fact as he makes his pitch, but the emphasis he puts on the island giving people second chances is very interesting, and this philosophy will come back again later. It's also a good tease for Charlie's episode, which is up next. Early Season 1 was very good at introducing setups as to who the focus would be on in the next episode. I love the performances of Yoonjin Kim and Daniel Dae Kim in the show, but they don't really get to stretch themselves too much here until later in the season. Their characters still feel quite restricted by the material, and it's too early for them to really break free of their already established roles, so we are only seeing glimpses. But their chemistry together is undeniable. They are terrific scene partners, and their best work is still to come. Out of all the love stories in Lost, with perhaps one key exception, the trials and tribulations of this star-crossed Korean couple is one of my favourite romances on the show, because their romance is earned, and the conflicts and imperfections within their relationship feel true. Jin and Sun might be on an island with other survivors, but they are also on an island by themselves, and it's here in this place that they will rediscover the heart of their relationship. So, solid drama all around. I like seeing the beef between characters over seemingly petty things, with the needle moving forward a little bit on how they relate to one another. Plus, this one has a very important mythological mystery introduced to keep everyone speculating as to the past history of this island. And that leads us perfectly into... There are some character mysteries that come up in almost every episode during this first season, many of which are conclusively answered at some point. As I've said before, I won't linger too long on these since they aren't related to the bigger, more complicated questions. In this case, Sun asks Jin in this episode, what kind of work was he doing for her father? We find out later in the season, Jin becomes a messenger who essentially roughs up and intimidates whoever Mr. Paik is unhappy with. This isn't really a mystery to me, but it did raise questions upon first viewing the show. We also find out later that Sun was already well aware of what Jin was doing, since she was the one really making the bargain with her father behind the scenes. Now to the real fun stuff. Who were Adam and Eve? This was one of the longest running mythological mysteries of the series, but seemed to slip further and further into the background of irrelevance as the seasons progressed. It wasn't until the final season that we were gifted an island flashback episode called Across the Sea, where we got to see the origin of Adam and Eve. It turns out that they are not a couple at all, but in fact a pseudo-mother figure and her surrogate son. Those characters are known as Mother and the Man in Black. I made a video all about the ancient past, and it's actually one of my favourite videos I've ever done, as I pick apart all of the lore involving these characters and the hidden backstory of the Egyptian settlers. But I want to cover the basics of the Adam and Eve backstory here because it is so fundamentally key to the mythology going forward. Mother was an island protector, possibly the first of her kind, whose job it was to keep the light at the heart of the island on and to defend it against anyone who might try to take it or destroy it. She was gifted with supernatural powers and immortality, but she came to view eternal life as a curse, and she grew tired of protecting the light. It's implied that she ruled for centuries, possibly even millennia. However, the island has plans for us all, and will not allow someone to die until the time is right. Mother's job was too important, so she would not be granted death without a replacement. Enter Claudia. And, well, exit Claudia. Mother steals the woman's offspring, 2 twins, one with a pre-chosen name, who we will know as Jacob, and the other who has no name at all because Claudia was not expecting to have a second child, so never thought up a second name. Which is why Jacob only refers to him as brother, and we will come to know him as the Man in Black. Anyway, Mother wants to raise these 2 boys as her replacements. She sees mankind as inherently corrupt after centuries of dealing with pesky, warring humans coming to her shores. So she decides to take 2 fresh apples from the tree. This way she can raise them exactly how she wants and manipulate them into taking over from her. Jacob is raised like a son. In her own words, she wants to keep him good, but at a distance. She doesn't want to taint him with her own darkness. With the boy in black, she sees early promise, because he demonstrates special abilities. Intuition. He can commune with the island, which means the island clearly wants this boy. Mother initially selects the boy in black to be the one to replace her as protector, which fosters some jealousy and competitiveness between the brothers. Eventually, the 2 brothers discover the truth of their upbringing, which causes a rift. The boy in black leaves Jacob and his fake mother behind to join with Claudia's fellow shipwreck survivors on the other side of the island. The 2 brothers grow into men. Jacob is still the mommy's boy, while the Man in Black has become a cunning manipulator who is using the Romans of his village as a means to an end, a means of escape. They've discovered one of the pockets of light that Mother has sworn to protect, and plan to tap into it in order to open a gateway off the island. Jacob tells Mother about his brother's plans, knowing on some level that she might be able to stop him. After all, Jacob doesn't have anyone else in his life but these 2 people. Mother confronts the Man in Black and realises that the time to pass the torch to the next generation has finally come. She cuts off access to the light, destroys his village, and kills everyone in it. Smoke monster. And she does this knowing full well that this will lead to her own demise at the hands of her son. And that is exactly what happens. but not before she gives the power of protectorship over to Jacob, who is a reluctant candidate, yet takes the job to appease her. Mother is killed by the Man in Black, and gets exactly what she wanted from the very start: death and a replacement. But Jacob rages against this, and punishes his brother by throwing him into the heart of the light to experience, as Mother explained, a fate worse than death. And so the Man in Black is transformed, his mortal body dies, and his soul is expelled from paradise. The Smoke Monster, as we will come to know him, is born. And these events leave behind two bodies, Jacob's only family. He places them together in the caves, which was their long-time home, and will go on to become a tomb-like mausoleum of sorts. He leaves with his brother's remains 2 pieces from the Senet game that they used to play as children, 1 black stone and 1 white stone, because now that the Man in Black is gone, there will be no one left to play games with. Or will there? Mother's terrible parenting, her manipulations, and her own emotional weaknesses cause a fallout that will last a long time on the island, right into the 21st century. There is so much more to this story and so many other layers, but we can explore those in good time. For those of you who do not wish to wait for that, I recommend you check out my video on the ancient past to scratch that itch. And of course, the mystery that we all desperately needed to know the answer to: why has Jack got tattoos, and what do they mean?
Hey, Charlie. Ask Jack about his tattoos.
Oh, you guys have an inside joke. How absolutely wonderful for you both.
This falls under the category of be careful what you wish for, folks. During the first 2 seasons of the show, there were repeat questions asked about Jack's tattoos, and the writers themselves clearly found Matthew Fox's real tattoos to create an interesting contradiction in the character of Jack, who seems like the type of milquetoast everyman who wouldn't go anywhere near a needle, at least in these early episodes. And I think they kept this tattoo origin story in the back pocket for a long time, in case they ever needed further backstory material to mine for the show. Probably hoping that they would never be that desperate. Well, it turns out they did get that desperate, and 3 seasons from now, we will discover that Jack's tattoos were given to him by a woman in Thailand by the name of Achara. The tattoos translate to, he walks amongst us, but he is not one of us. In other words, he is a leader, but that also makes him feel alone. It only really occurred to me while writing the script for this episode guide that someday I will be doing one of these guides for episodes like Stranger in a Strange Land. It's going to be a lot of fun when we get there.
Are you having fun with me, Jack?
Oh, yeah. Things could be worse.
Oh!
The title of this episode, House of the Rising Sun, comes from a popular American folk song. While I suspect that the title was chosen for the episode due to its play on the word sun, the song itself has some significance to the plot. The lyrics are ultimately about being led astray by lust, vice, and sin, and finding oneself unable to leave a place. And we can interpret that as being both tantamount to crashing on an island, as well as being trapped in a toxic marriage. This episode marks our first return to the concept of black and white stones, which were depicted in the pilot with the backgammon game that Locke was demonstrating to Walt.
2 players, 2 sides. One is light, one is dark.
Now this notion of light and darkness is being connected to the mythological mystery of the island's version of Adam and Eve, whom Locke names with a smirk to play up the biblical allusions to Eden, which he views this island as representing to him in many ways.
Our very own Adam and Eve.
Most people know the story of Adam and Eve, but it's interesting to briefly recap it with Lost in mind, whilst drawing parallels between the island and its ancient history. According to Genesis in the Bible, God separated the light from the darkness. He created Adam and Eve and gifted them an everlasting paradise in which to inhabit. However, Eve is manipulated by a serpent into stealing the forbidden fruit from the Tree of Knowledge in order to learn the unknowable and harness the power of God. The stolen fruit corrupts Adam and Eve, thereby destroying their innocence, and their disobedience against God causes them to be cast out of paradise. This is a story that has many readings available to it and has been the source of much debate and discussion by religious scholars, believers and non-believers alike. Some take it very literally, while others take it as instructive allegory, and some see it as pure fable and creation myth. In Lost, the Adam and Eve of the caves also turn out to have a lot in common with the original biblical story, only with a few components switched around. The island is clearly Eden, the source could be viewed as God, with the Cave of Light itself being an embodiment of the Tree of Knowledge. And we could view Mother as the original Eve, since she was the first to go down into the cave and learn the cost of losing one's soul. And the man in black could be viewed as Adam, following in the same footsteps as Eve and sharing in the forbidden fruit, only to end up suffering the same fate as her. Of course, it's not supposed to be a literal match for the Genesis story, any more than Jacob and the Man in Black's conflict is supposed to be a literal match for the story of Horus and Set from ancient Egyptian mythology. Lost puts forward its own creation myth with the source, and presents its own mythological figures, such as Mother, Jacob and the Man in Black, showing us how they all collectively screwed up Eden. However you prefer to read events or compare texts, Across the Sea certainly fulfills the biblical illusions that House of the Rising Sun first kicks up. The references to the Bible and many Judeo-Christian stories won't stop at Genesis either. There are several religious characters on the show, including Charlie Pace, who was raised Catholic and wrestles with his own morality and faith. Rose Nadler is shown to be a Christian woman who prays and gives counsel to those in need. Season 2 introduces us to Mr. Echo, who claims to be an actual priest, who discusses the nature of religion and interpretations from the Bible in various scenes. We will also eventually meet a character by the name of Richard Alpert, whose God-fearing beliefs date back even further, and who goes through a religious trial by fire himself that is worthy of being a holy book parable. There are too many to cover right now, but we shall explore all of these religious themes and motifs as they become more relevant, starting in the next episode with Charlie Pace. As previously mentioned, this episode explores the theme of communication, and how progress can only ever be made once characters start talking to one another and overcoming their differences. In this case, it's a language barrier, which will continue to cause issues for Jin for the next couple of seasons. One of the best scenes that really puts us in his position comes in Season 2 episode The Whole Truth, where we finally get to hear the world through Jin's ears.
Så samvägar.
Nice, very snow.
Sel, mamma.
Oh, nice to shoot.
This links into another broader theme that becomes more and more relevant to the narrative: deception and withholding truth. Characters who lie, con, and distort the truth. Sun is lying to her husband about speaking English and keeping up the facade with her fellow survivors. And as the layers of her backstory get peeled back, we learn that Sun is more adept at lying and deception than we first realise, going all the way back to her childhood. In the Confidence Man episode guide, we will dive into the themes of lies and cons in far more depth. Elsewhere, those numbers keep on coming. Charlie tells Locke that he hasn't played his guitar.
My guitar, 8 days, 11 hours, give or take.
Sun is instructed to rendezvous with a car outside the airport at 11:15. Now, there are other numbers thrown out in this episode that do not match our iconic sequence, but they are still significant numbers for different reasons, and I felt this section was an appropriate place to have this particular discussion. Upon finding Adam and Eve, Jack determines the skeletal remains to be no less than 40 to 50 years old, based on the deterioration of their clothing. This would put Adam and Eve as dying sometime around the mid-20th century. Of course, we later see that the bodies are in fact 2,000 years old. Nice one, Jack. So why the discrepancy? In my two-part series, The Truth About Lost, I explore the development of the show, and I analyse the various evidence available regarding how much the writers knew and when they knew it, plus any retcons they made in the later seasons as they related to details and plot lines established early on. At this very point in the show's journey, the writer's room was still developing the mythology and nothing was set in stone. All they knew when they introduced these skeletons is that Adam and Eve would end up having major significance to the mythology in some way. During Season 3, when asked about the nature of the skeletons in the cave, the the writers teased the idea that Adam and Eve could actually be the end result of our castaways time travelling to the past. Showrunner Colton Cuse said the following: "The answer to that question goes to the nature of the timeline of the island. We don't want to say too much about it, but there are a couple of Easter eggs embedded in that episode, one of which is an anagram that actually sheds some light on the skeletons and hints at a larger mythological mystery that will start to unfold later in the season." Now, the Easter egg he is referring to is the introduction of Mytilos Bioscience, which is an anagram for lost time, a foreshadowing of time travel playing a significant role in the seasons to come. During the mini-camp that the writers had during the development of Season 1, they'd already discussed the possibility of introducing a time travel element to the show, but the network was allergic to anything too fantastical or anything too sci-fi, so the writers stuck a pin in that idea for a while longer. However, it seems likely that they introduced Adam and Eve early in order to set up something that they could deploy more easily in the future. No pun intended. Throughout the original run of the series, many fans had speculated that the identity of the skeletons would end up being a couple we already knew from the show. Some hypothesised that it would be Jack and Kate, others speculated it might end up being Rose and Bernard, although that would have made the white and black stones a little too on the nose. Whereas for me, I always thought that the original plan might have been to make Jin and Sun become the skeletons, since Adam and Eve were introduced in the couple's very first centric episode. When Colton Cuse gave that response in the 2007 interview, I believe the writers' room fully intended to go this route and commit to Adam and Eve being established characters who had time travelled to the past and died there together. But something changed those plans when it came to breaking the time travel arcs for Season 5, most likely due to the mechanics of how the time travel ended up working and what they were trying to accomplish dramatically with their storylines. Jack and Kate had to make it back to the present for the final season. Rose and Bernard had decided to retire, but were not quite old enough to die of old age in the caves before time travelling with everyone else. And Jin and Sun had been once again separated, only this time by 30 years of time, with one in the past and the other in the present. And this is just the way it works out sometimes. Plans change and evolve. It's a shame that they never got to stick the landing with this one, as they did appear to have an answer planned in theory for several seasons in advance. But the practicalities of executing this idea could no longer be followed through on, so they had to abandon it, and this required them to come up with a new answer that still held mythological significance to the story they were telling, and therefore Adam and Eve were recalibrated to become Mother and the Man in Black, who were in fact 2,000 years old. But somewhere out there in an alternate dimension, the writers got to execute their original plan, that Adam and Eve did indeed die 50 years previous, and were in fact two characters that we had already come to know and love. Finally, there is this prophetic line spoken in this episode.
I found this in the wreckage, and I figured, hey, why let a $20,000 watch go to waste? Which is ridiculous, since time doesn't matter on a damn island! Oh,
Michael. Dear, dear Michael, you have no idea. If you'd like to see a more in-depth breakdown of how the show was written over the years, then be sure to check out my Truth About Lost series. Otherwise, I will see you for the next video on The Moth, where I can finally discuss the ups and downs of the Charlie Pace character and Dominic Monaghan's performance. I've got a lot to say about this guy, so I hope you can join me for it. Please like, share and subscribe to keep this channel alive. You can also access content early via my Patreon and help me to make more videos just like this one. Thank you for watching everyone, I'll see you back on the island.
No. 8, 7, 6, 5.